I want to talk a little bit about the community of Elder Scrolls Online from what I have observed and explain why I think it's possibly the most inclusive community that I've experienced in any of the MMOs that I've played. Now, I know there's a lot of people who will say Final Fantasy XIV has the most inclusive community, and I guess that depends on what you define as inclusive. When I think about inclusiveness, one thing I think about is diversity of different play styles. Because the first thing you're looking for when you talk about inclusiveness in a game that's an MMO sort of a game, where people are engaging in a persistent online environment as they do, is to offer a bit of everything that different sorts of players would want to experience. And I think ESO does that. You do have PvP, you do have PvE, you do have good questing, you do have a buying and selling and trading economy, you do have role playing, you do have good character customization, you do have good open world exploration opportunities. There's just a lot of different things going for ESO to make a case for having a lot of the different things that attract different kinds of players. So you don't just have one kind of player that joins the game, as is the case with maybe some other games. And a good example of that would be Albion Online, maybe New World to some degree, or EVE Online. Games that are more focused on just the competitive elements of PvP. They tend to be more toxic. Why? Not because there's anything wrong with the games, but because one specific type of activity, being the primary focus of the game, attracts a specific kind of player, and that kind of player, when it's not moderated by a broad assortment of different kinds of people doing different kinds of things, creates an echo chamber of just one sort of group. One demographic dominating a game doesn't create a balanced community. It creates a toxic one where people will say things like, well, if you don't want to do what we're doing, then you should just uninstall the game and go play a different one. Well, people in ESO are a lot more likely, by a long shot, to say, well, you should play the game how you like to play the game. If you want to play it solo, then you should just go play it solo. If you want to just do quests, then just do quests. If you want to just buy and sell on the market board, go for it. There's a lot of support for people to play the game however they want. There's people who just play the game for its player housing and they decorate their houses. You see, there's a lot of different things people can do, and there's all the encouragement to let people enjoy whatever path that happens to be for them. Now, the next thing I'll talk about on the topic of inclusiveness in ESO is just the sort of people that I've encountered in the game. And I've seen a few people who are obnoxious or ridiculous, as you will find in any internet sort of situation. But for the greater part, I've found a lot of diversity in the sorts of people who play the game. I've met people who are retired from the military, school teachers, people who are 40 years into their career, people who are teenagers, people who are everything from young to old seem to enjoy the Elder Scrolls Online. You have a decent mix of male and female players. There's not that sense of It's 90% guys all trying to be macho, and then you have it's very much a rarity if a woman ever wants to play the game. That's sort of ridiculous, but there are some games that are that way. ESO isn't that way. Or you might, in some games, get the feeling that everybody's a teenager or something, and there's no mature adult people that would ever want to play the game for whatever reason. It's just dominated by, juvenile people who are not the kind of people you'd want to really have a conversation with. ESO, I'm sure, does have some of those, but it has, for every one of those, someone who's not one of those. And in my experience with ESO, it's a lot more of a normal mix of people, a normal cross-section of community that's pretty similar, probably, to what you'd find in a real-life community outside of the realm of gaming. Not just one kind of people, but all kinds of people. Anybody who you might encounter on the street might go home and be playing ESO. Even the people who you think might be a bit more serious-minded and aren't the kind of people who like to play video games. You just never know. When I played Final Fantasy XIV, I thought it had a nice community, don't get me wrong, but it felt a lot more imbalanced. It felt a lot more kind of cringy in some cases. Like, you have all these people that are sort of into things like ERP and virtual night clubbing or something. It's just sort of weird. It's like a lot of the role play in Final Fantasy XIV isn't like Dungeons and Dragons role playing of imagining yourself in a fantasy world. It's more like some sort of a sex chat room with a game being used as a front, so people can say they're playing a game, but really it's like they're doing some sort of cringy, weird kink sort of thing on the backside. And, I don't have a problem with that. That's fine if that's what you want to do. However, it's not really mainstream. It's not really normal gaming to me. And it's fine if there's a little bit of that, but then it goes back to inclusiveness of a broad demographic of people. And the more you have kind of strange things going on in the community, the more it's sort of, I guess it's a turnoff to all the more normal people who just want a gaming experience are going to look at that and be like, well, that's not really what I'm into, so I don't know about that. Even the graphical style of Final Fantasy XIV just seemed a bit off to me. Like, it's sort of fantasy style, but it's also got a bit of that sort of Asian anime kind of a look to it, a little bit. But then it doesn't really look like a JRPG exactly to me either. For example, I think something like Blue Protocol or Genshin Impact stand out as really beautiful anime RPG games. But Final Fantasy XIV is totally not that kind of an art style. So it's kind of in between. It's not really any one art style. It's got its own style all of its own. And I think that's one of the selling points of that game. It is unique. It does have its own sense of identity. But it also really is not as appealing to everyone. It's more appealing if you like that particular sort of game. or if you want to be part of that specific community. But it's more of a niche. Elder Scrolls Online feels a lot more like it just appeals to the general populace of fantasy-inspired, nerdy people who want to go into a medieval sort of Grimm's fairy tales style world of princesses and castles, to go off on an indescript fantasy adventure, the kind that you would have read about in a fairy tale book when you were a child. That's Elder Scrolls Online. And I think that's amazing. And that's something I like. I think it's really encouraging when I get to jump into chat with somebody who maybe I barely know or I don't know at all. And then next thing you know, we're having just a good conversation about something. And I come to realize that the person I'm talking to isn't your traditional teenager who is playing, on the family computer or, in their room or something. But, there's somebody who's, had a established career. They're a person who you would, view, I guess, as a person of substance, and that's the norm in ESO. There's a lot of people in all walks of life, in all ages, and all perspectives, and all political views. Like, you won't have, it seems like there's plenty of people who identify as all sorts of different political views, like I don't really want to be super political in a game, but then it's also nice to know that the demographic of people playing the game isn't extremely skewed. It doesn't feel like, people are, extremely, you know, inclined to lean one way or the other. You find some people that are conservative and some people that are not, and some people that are liberal, and everybody just has a good time together because all in all, we have the game in common. And I think that's nice. I think that's not every single game though. Like Guild Wars 2 is kind of like that. I think Guild Wars 2 has a lot of diversity in its player base as well. And I think a big part of why goes back to, again, Guild Wars 2 tries to be pretty open-ended, so all different kinds of people can play the game. The only objection I have to Guild Wars 2 is that it feels a bit limited as a game. When you look at the open world and all the different things you can do to explore, and all the different looks and cosmetics and things, sometimes Guild Wars 2 feels a bit lacking. And it would be rather difficult for me to look at a game like Elder Scrolls Online and then compare it to Guild Wars 2, because GW2 is not really it's just not really at the same level. Like, there's things that it just doesn't have. You don't have player housing at all, for example, in Guild Wars 2. So, are there other games that are great? Yeah, certainly there are. But I think there's a lot going for ESO in terms of just having a broad appeal to a lot of different kinds of people. And that's inclusiveness, both in the sense of the different sorts of people you'll encounter while you're playing the game, and also the sorts of activities you can do while you're in the game. And I do think that both of those ultimately are connected. I don't think that it's a coincidence that a game that includes a lot of different styles of play also tends to have a lot of different varieties of players. So, would recommend Elder Scrolls Online for all different kinds of people. It's definitely worth giving a shot. It seems like the player base is pretty respectful. You don't sign in and you see a bunch of profanity or people spamming chat in a ridiculous way. It's pretty civilized and normal most of the time. It's got a bit of kind of weird sort of things, like if you want to get into some sort of ERP or strange um, role play in general. I think those things do exist in the game, most likely, um, but not in an overpowered way like maybe Final Fantasy 14, where you can't avoid it if that's not what you're looking for. Um, so that's about what I have to say on that. Overall, I do think ESO is kind of like the carrots and potatoes of the MMO space. It's not the best at everything, but if you were going to just have a lifetime supply of one thing, it wouldn't be a bad thing to have a whole lot more of. So I'd encourage anyone to give it a try and see what you think about it. It has been said that the best part of the experience is the people. It's important to find a place in the game where you can connect with others. That's what's going to make the game fun. And I guess that's what I will end with. My final thought on this is guild. There's so many different kinds of guilds. You can join a casual guild. You can join a casual trading guild. You can join a casual social guild. And that's also another thing that really, really helps a lot with the sense of inclusiveness in the game. It's very easy to join a guild that is a good fit for you instead of finding yourself joining a guild that is going to be geared toward activities that you don't necessarily enjoy, and then you don't have a choice. So you either have to do activities you don't enjoy with a guild, or you don't join a guild at all, and then you miss out on that social element. Like for example, I've joined a guild where the only thing that they do is they get together and they have virtual campfires, which basically just means a free invite at any time, regardless of what you're doing in the game. You can jump into the Discord if you want and chat or voice chat or whatever you want. That's about all there is to it. They're just a few friendly people that get together and try to make friends with each other. Very nice, you know. Now I've joined a guild that's just a casual trading guild. Doesn't have any requirements other than I can sell my things there. But I can join the Discord. I can have somebody to say hello, good evening, how are you doing in the guild chat. It's just a nice, friendly, social thing. And if I ever felt like I wasn't, getting a good experience out of it, it's super easy for me to join multiple guilds all at once. You can have up to 5, or quit and find another one, because the guild finder is very easy to navigate, and there's always different guilds recruiting. So that's another thing that really works in the favor of ESO to create a sense of inclusive communities, because you really do want to be able to easily come and go. If you jump into a community that you don't feel is a good fit for you, it's good for you to feel like you have other options. And I think ESO does a good job of that. Anyway, till next time, I hope that you have a wonderful day, and thank you very much for watching. Always. Goodbye.